I faked my own death to discover which of my friends would take my inheritance. Money doesn't just change people, it reveals them. When everyone thought I was dead, I watched from the shadows as my closest friends showed their true colors over my $18 million inheritance. Growing up poor taught me two valuable lessons. Money matters more than people admit, and trust should never be given freely. By 35, I'd built a tech security company worth millions and surrounded myself with friends who seemed to love me for who I was, not what I owned. At least that's what I wanted to believe. The doubts started at my birthday party last year. I overheard my friend Marcus telling someone, "Yeah, Eric's great, but honestly, being friends with a millionaire has its perks." Just a joke, perhaps, but it stuck with me. Then came the emergencies requiring loans, the business proposals seeking investors, the constant reminders of my fortune whenever decisions needed to be made. "You can afford it, Eric. What's 50 grand to someone like you?" If I had your money, I wouldn't think twice. I began to wonder, if I disappeared tomorrow, who among my inner circle would genuinely mourn me, and who would just mourn the loss of access to my wealth? The idea came after a near miss on my motorcycle. A driver cut me off, sending me skidding across the highway. I walked away with minor scrapes, but the local paper mistakenly reported that the motorcyclist was critically injured. For 24 hours before the correction, my phone exploded with concerned messages. Watching people's reactions to my possible death was illuminating. That's when I decided to stage my own death, not permanently, but long enough to see who my real friends were. With my background in security and a small fortune at my disposal, I had the means to pull it off convincingly. I approached my lawyer, Sarah, the only person I trusted completely. She thought I was insane but eventually agreed to help after I explained my growing paranoia and need for clarity. Together, we crafted a plan. First, I prepared my will, leaving specific amounts to each friend with unusual conditions that would reveal their characters. To my business partner Kevin, I left 40% of my company shares, contingent on him establishing a foundation in my name to help underprivileged kids learn coding. To Darren and Jessica, my oldest friends, I left my vacation home in Aspen to share, equally. To Marcus, who always claimed he could turn any business around, I left $500,000 as seed funding for the business idea he was always talking about, but with the stipulation that he had to launch within 6 months. To Melissa, who I'd dated briefly years ago but remained close with, I left my classic car collection. Each bequest was designed not just as a gift, but as a test. Then came the accident. I arranged for my yacht to have a catastrophic fire while sailing solo off the California coast. The Coast Guard found the burning vessel, but no body, just enough of my personal effects to make it clear I was aboard. The official conclusion: lost at sea, presumed dead. Through Sarah, I rented an apartment, overlooking the cemetery where my memorial service would be held. With a high-powered camera, I watched as my life was commemorated, studied the faces of the mourners, noted who cried and who networked. I had motion-activated cameras installed in my homes and office, and Sarah fed me updates about who was saying what, doing what, claiming what. What I discovered over the next 3 months changed me forever. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since my death, and I'm watching my life unravel from a small apartment 10 miles from my primary residence. Sarah visits weekly with updates, recordings, and documents requiring my signature under my new temporary identity. Living as James Cooper is strange. I wear colored contacts, glasses, and keep my naturally dark hair bleached blonde. I shop at different stores, speak with a slight accent, and stay away from anyone who might know Eric Grant. The memorial service was larger than I expected. Over 200 people came, many I barely knew. The eulogy, delivered by Kevin, was touching but focused heavily on my business accomplishments rather than who I was as a person. Darren spoke about our childhood, about how far I'd come from our days sharing a single pizza in our dorm room. His speech made me momentarily regret this experiment. The real revelations began at the reception. Sarah had placed hidden microphones throughout my home where the event was held. Listening to the recordings later was eye-opening. Marcus, standing beside my portrait. Such a shame. He was going to invest in my startup next month. We'd already discussed figures. A complete lie. I'd repeatedly declined his half-baked business proposals. Melissa, speaking to a group of mutual friends. We had reconnected recently. He wanted to give us another chance. I think he was going to propose during our Bali trip next month. Another fabrication. We'd had lunch 3 months ago. Purely platonic. The most shocking conversation was between Kevin and an investor I'd never trusted. Kevin. With Eric gone, I can finally take the company in the direction it needs to go. He was too cautious. Too concerned with ethics over profit. The military contracts he rejected. I'm reopening those discussions next week. Investor. Smart move. What about his controlling shares? Kevin. His family never cared about the business. They'll sell to me for the right price. By this time next year, I'll have complete control. This from the man who'd been my business partner for 8 years, who'd stood in my home talking about my visionary leadership. Only Darren and Jessica seemed genuinely grief-stricken. The cameras caught Jessica sitting alone in my library holding our old college yearbook, genuinely crying. Darren spent an hour on my back deck staring at the ocean, occasionally wiping his eyes. The reading of the will was scheduled for next week. Sarah advised me that several people, including Melissa, had already contacted her asking for preliminary information about their inheritances. Marcus had inquired about acceleration options for receiving funds. I'm starting to wonder if this experiment was a mistake, not because it isn't revealing the truth, but because the truth is harder to bear than I anticipated. Update 2. 1. Month post-death, and the reading of the will has catalyzed exactly the dynamic I suspected yet hoped against. Sarah recorded the entire will reading. The reaction to my obituary of carefully allocated assets was a study in human nature at its most transparent. Kevin's face fell when he learned his inheritance came with the foundation requirement. A coding foundation. That will take time and resources away from operations, he complained immediately. When Sarah explained the terms were non-negotiable, he asked if there was a minimum requirement for the foundation's funding, or if it could be largely symbolic. So much for honoring my legacy. Melissa seemed disappointed with the car collection until Sarah mentioned the estimated value, over $2.1 million. Her grief suddenly intensified. She began sharing stories about our special drives along the coast and how Eric always said these cars would be mine someday. We'd never taken such drives. I'd never made such promises. Marcus was initially elated about the $500,000 until the 6-month business launch requirement registered. 6 months? That's impossible. Any serious business needs at least a year of planning. The man who'd boasted for years about his ready-to-launch million-dollar idea suddenly needed more time. When Sarah suggested he could decline the inheritance, if the terms were problematic, he quickly backpedaled. The most surprising reactions came from Darren and Jessica regarding the Aspen property. They looked at each other in confusion. But Eric knew we couldn't afford the taxes and upkeep on a place like that, Jessica said quietly. Darren nodded. We can't accept this. It would financially ruin us trying to maintain it. They asked Sarah if they could sell the property and split the proceeds, explaining they would use their shares to establish college funds for their children in my name. It was the only genuinely respectful response to my bequests. Post-reading, the real maneuvering began. Kevin has already consulted attorneys about minimizing the foundation's impact on business operations. Melissa listed 2 of my lesser cars with a private broker. Sarah blocked the sale. Marcus has suddenly become a regular at Startup Incubator. events, pitching a hastily assembled business plan, using my name and our partnership as selling points. Meanwhile, I've continued my observations from afar. Kevin has already redecorated my office and taken down the company mission statement I'd crafted. Melissa has been seen driving my most valuable car, a restored 1967 Shelby GT500, telling people it was practically already hers. Marcus has moved into my city apartment, claiming to friends he's house-sitting until the estate is settled, though no such arrangement exists. Only Darren and Jessica have kept their distance from my possessions. Instead, they established a small scholarship at our old high school in my name, using their own limited funds. I'm starting to see with painful clarity that of my inner circle of 5 close friends, only 2 valued me above what I could provide them. The experiment is working, but each revelation feels like a fresh wound. Sarah thinks I should end this charade soon. "You've seen enough," she told me yesterday. "Continuing this only prolongs your pain." But I'm not ready. Not yet. I need to see how far they'll go. Update tree. 2 months since my death, and the situation has evolved in ways I never anticipated. My experiment has taken on a life of its own, with alliances forming and fracturing among those I left behind. Kevin has fully rebranded the company, removing nearly all traces of my influence. The website now credits him as founder and CEO, relegating me to co-founder, deceased. The military contracts I rejected on ethical grounds are now in final negotiation stages. Sarah, acting as the executor, reminded him that his inheritance of shares is contingent on establishing the foundation for underprivileged kids. His response was to create a bare minimum entity, allocating just $50,000 annually, 0.1% of our company's profits, and staffing it with his wife's cousin who has 0 experience in education or nonprofit management. Marcus's business launch has been an education in revisionist history. He's created a security software company that he claims is based on Eric Grant's unrealized vision. He's been approaching our former clients, telling them he was the brains behind Grant Security's algorithms and that I was more of the face of the company. Anyone who knew us would recognize this as absurd. Marcus couldn't code his way out of a digital paper bag. He's raised nearly $300,000 from outside investors using my name and reputation. Melissa has gone beyond simply driving my cars. She's given interviews to 2 local luxury lifestyle magazines, posing with my most valuable vehicles and claiming we had rekindled our relationship before my death. Eric wanted me to enjoy these cars, she told one publication. They were symbols of our love story. She's also been hosting parties at my main residence, though she has no legal right to use the property. The most disturbing development involves Kevin and Marcus. Security footage shows them meeting at my home office, which Kevin had no right to enter, going through my personal files. Their conversation, captured on the hidden cameras, revealed their plan to access my offshore accounts and digital assets. His cryptocurrency holdings alone are worth millions, Kevin said. The executor doesn't even know they exist. He's wrong about that. Sarah knows everything, and all my digital assets are securely locked behind authentication that only I can provide. The bright spot in this dark experiment continues to be Darren and Jessica. Not only did they decline the Aspen house as too expensive to maintain, but they've also been protecting my reputation and legacy. When a somewhat unflattering profile appeared in a business magazine suggesting I had been planning to sell sensitive client data before my untimely death, Darren immediately contacted the publication with evidence to the contrary. Jessica has been quietly gathering my personal effects, photographs, journals, mementos, to preserve for when his parents might want them, unaware that my estranged parents would have little interest. Last week, something unexpected happened. I was shopping at a grocery store across town when I literally bumped carts with Jessica. My disguise is good, blonde hair, colored contacts, glasses, even a subtle facial prosthetic that changes the shape of my jaw. But for a moment she looked at me with a strange expression. "I'm sorry," she said after our carts collided. "No problem." "At all," I replied, using my practiced accent. She continued to stare. "This is going to sound crazy, but you remind me of a friend I lost recently." My heart nearly stopped. "I get that sometimes. I must have one of those familiar faces." She smiled sadly. "No, it's something specific. The way you stand. He used to shift his weight to his left foot exactly like you're doing now." She shook her head. "I'm sorry. Grief makes you see things, I guess." I made a mental note to be more careful about my mannerisms and quickly finished my shopping. The encounter rattled me more than I expected. Jessica had noticed something about me that my other so-called close friends never had, a habitual way of standing that I wasn't even aware of myself. Sarah has again suggested I end the experiment. "You know who your real friends are now," she argued. "Continuing this charade only risks exposure and further hurt." She's right, of course, but I've come too far to stop now. The final phase of my plan is about to begin, my resurrection and return. I've already drafted separate letters to each of them, explaining what I did and why, with specific references to their actions during my death. I'm giving myself one more week of observation. Then, Eric Grant returns from the dead. Update 4. 3 months after my death, I finally ended my experiment. The results were even more illuminating and painful than I expected. The catalyst for my return was an emergency call from Sarah. "You need to come back now," she said. "Kevin and Marcus are trying to hack your personal servers. If they succeed, they could access client data that would compromise national security." This crossed a line I couldn't ignore. My company handled cybersecurity for several government contractors, and a data breach could have serious consequences beyond my personal vendetta. I had planned a gradual, controlled revelation, starting with private confrontations. Instead, I was forced to make a more dramatic entrance. Sarah arranged an emergency board meeting at my company under the pretense of addressing succession issues. Kevin, as acting CEO, would be required to attend. She also made sure Marcus, Melissa, Darren, and Jessica would be present for various plausible reasons. The conference room camera feed showed all 5 of them seated around the table with Sarah and 2 board members. Kevin was midway through a presentation about his vision for the company's future when I walked in, undisguised, very much alive. The reactions were exactly what you'd expect: shock, disbelief, confusion. Darren actually fainted. Jessica started crying. Melissa screamed. Marcus went pale. Kevin dropped his presentation clicker. "Sorry I'm late," I said. "Death is quite the inconvenience." What followed was 2 hours of explanations and confrontations. I laid out exactly what I had done, and why. I played selected recordings of their conversations and actions after my death. I showed them copies of the false statements they had made, the attempts to access my accounts, the misrepresentations of our relationships. Kevin and Marcus tried to justify their actions as protecting the company's interests. Melissa claimed she was preserving my memory by using my possessions. None of them apologized. Instead, they expressed outrage at my deception, as if I were the villain in this story. Darren and Jessica's reactions were entirely different. After the initial shock, Jessica asked simply, "Were you at Morrison's grocery 3 weeks ago? With blonde hair?" I nodded. I knew it was you. Something in the eyes. Darren, once he recovered, asked, "Why didn't you trust us enough to tell us the truth?" That question hit harder than any accusation from the others. I needed to know who my real friends were, I answered, and now I do. The fallout was swift and final. Kevin was removed from the company by board vote that same day. The terms of my will, which was now void since I wasn't dead, would have given him 40% of my shares. Instead, he left with nothing but his original 15% stake and a pending investigation into his attempts to access secure data. Marcus's investors pulled out once they learned he had misrepresented his relationship with me and my company. His hastily launched business collapsed within days. Melissa was served with a cease and desist order regarding my vehicles and property. She's currently facing a civil suit for the damage done to one of my cars and unauthorized use of my home. As for Darren and Jessica, after a long conversation filled with justified hurt on their part and apologies on mine, we're cautiously rebuilding our friendship. They understand why I did what I did, even if they don't agree with my methods. We could have just taken a trust fall workshop or something, Darren joked weakly. The broader consequences have been mixed. I've lost friends and business associates who think my deception was unforgivable, regardless of what it revealed. My company's reputation has taken a hit. Faking one's death doesn't inspire client confidence in one's stability. I've had to do damage control with clients, partners, and the press. But I've gained something invaluable. Clarity. I know exactly who I can trust and who I can't. I've restructured my company, my will, and my circle of friends accordingly. I've also established a real foundation for teaching underprivileged kids to code, the one good idea to come out of this mess, with Darren and Jessica on the board of directors. Was it worth it? I'm still not sure. The knowledge I gained came at a tremendous cost. But as someone who grew up with nothing, I've always believed that knowing the unvarnished truth, however painful, is better than living with comfortable lies. Money doesn't just buy things, it creates a distortion field that makes it nearly impossible to know who your true friends are. Sometimes it takes something as extreme as death, or the illusion of it, to see clearly through that field. I'm back among the living now. Fewer friends, but better ones, wiser about human nature and finally able to trust the people around me. Not because people have changed, but because now I know exactly who they are. Update 5. 6 months after my return from the dead, life has settled into a new normal that bears little resemblance to my pre-death existence. The lawsuit with Melissa was settled out of court. Her lawyer approached us with an unexpected proposal. She would publicly apologize for her actions and misrepresentations in exchange for me dropping the suit. She also returned all the personal items she had taken from my houses. The apology seemed genuine, though I suspect it was motivated more by her new relationship with a local politician who couldn't afford the scandal than by true remorse. Still, I accepted it, and we've achieved a cold peace. We'll never be friends again, but at least we're not active enemies. Marcus has left the state entirely. After his business collapsed and his reputation was shattered, he apparently decided a fresh start was necessary. According to his social media, he's now working as a strategic consultant in Arizona. I haven't heard from him directly, and I don't expect to. Kevin has proven more problematic. He retained his 15% stake in the company, which makes him a minority shareholder I can't simply ignore. He's filed a lawsuit claiming my fraudulent death constituted corporate malfeasance and damaged the company's value. Our attorneys believe his case is weak, but it's still an ongoing headache. More concerning are the rumors that he's sharing company information with competitors. Nothing we can prove yet, but we're watching carefully. My relationship with Darren and Jessica has deepened in unexpected ways. After the initial shock and hurt wore off, they approached me with a proposition. They wanted to work with me. Darren has a background in finance that I never fully utilized before, and Jessica's experience in education made her perfect for running the coding foundation that had begun as a test for Kevin, but evolved into something I genuinely believe in. I accepted their offer, and it's been the best decision I've made. The foundation now operates in 15 schools across 3 states, with plans to expand nationally next year. Darren has reorganized my personal finances and the company's, structure in ways that have increased profitability while actually improving our ethical standards. We've terminated the military contracts Kevin had pursued and refocused on civilian security infrastructure. The most significant change has been internal. I no longer feel the need to test people or question their motives at every turn. The experiment, for all its ethical problems and painful revelations, lanced a boil of paranoia that had been festering for years. I know who I can trust now, not just Darren and Jessica, but also Sarah, who kept my secret at great personal and professional risk, and a handful of others who were peripheral to the main drama but showed their true colors in various ways. I've also reconciled with my parents, something I never expected. News of my death and subsequent resurrection somehow broke through decades of estrangement. My father, who had always dismissed my career as playing with computers, finally acknowledged that I'd built something significant. My mother, who had communicates only through birthday and Christmas cards for years, actually visited my home. We're not close, and maybe we never will be, but there's a channel of communication now that didn't exist before. The professional fallout has largely subsided. After an initial exodus of clients concerned about stability, most have returned, along with new ones drawn by our refocused mission and enhanced security protocols. The company is smaller now. We spun off 2 divisions that didn't align with our core values, but stronger and more profitable. I've sold most of my properties, keeping only my primary residence and a small cabin in Montana where I go to disconnect completely. The car collection that Melissa coveted has been mostly donated to various automotive museums, except for 2 favorites that I still drive regularly. As for my death itself, it's become something of an urban legend in tech circles. I'm regularly asked to tell the story at conferences. I always decline, and I've received several book and movie offers, also declined. I'm sure someone will eventually write that book or make that movie without my cooperation. I'm fine with that, as long as they get the moral of the story right. The journalist who finally convinced me to share my story asked if I regret what I did. It's a complex question. I regret the pain I caused to those who truly cared about me. I regret not finding a less extreme way to test the loyalty of those around me. I don't regret learning the truth, however harsh it was. If there's a lesson in all this, perhaps it's that wealth obscures as much as it reveals. Money doesn't just change people. It changes how they present themselves to you, how they interact with you, the face they show to you. Seeing behind those masks required something drastic. Was faking my death too drastic? Probably. But I can't deny the clarity it brought. I still shift my weight to my left foot when I stand still, the unconscious habit that Jessica noticed even through my disguise. It's a small thing, insignificant really, but it reminds me daily of an important truth. Real friends see you, the actual you, not the wealth, not the status, not what you can do for them. They notice the little things that make you who you are, and that awareness perhaps is worth dying for, even if only temporarily.